Now, it's mid-2024, and they still haven't repainted a single unit. It's fine. It's fine. They still haven't repainted a single unit.
Warning, this video contains major spoilers from last year's Bensonville trip. Watch part 1 first if you haven't done that yet. Anyways, on to the show.
Following my first trip to Bensonville in May of 2023, I was eager to go on a second one. However, this trip would be much more expansive than the last. Not only did I want to get back to Bensonville to revenge for the Sioux not moving, but there was also a few new goals. I learned there was a massive Union Pacific yard in Bensonville, as well as the BNSF Smurf number 2042. My brother loves this locomotive, and when we found out that it was working in Aurora, which is relatively near to Bensonville, we knew we had to make a stop there on the trip to at least attempt to catch it. That was how the trip was laid out at the beginning of April. Unfortunately, things went downhill immediately when BNSF was dumb and decided to put the Smurf in storage. So that didn't go well. Trenton didn't want to come on the trip because of that. I mean, he didn't. Then, only a few weeks later, CPKC dropped their new paint scheme, which looks terrible. And I knew I had to get to Bensonville now because if I came next year once again, well, I would be guaranteed to see at least one CPKC painted unit. Then the Sioux unit left Bensonville. This was covered in my previous Bensonville vlog. It went up to St. Paul for maintenance. Fortunately, it came back right before the trip, so that was very fortunate. The second goal, which was in the UP yard, was a UP gen set. I like gen sets, unlike most people, and this is pretty much the only place in the entire Chicagoland area where they operate, so I knew I had to see one. Finally, on May 27th, 2024, my dad came and picked me up. It was finally time to return to Bensonville. Frankly, weather speaking, we chose a terrible day for the trip because it was supposed to thunderstorm and also tornadoes. Fortunately, all of those were north of us. Anyways, as we approached, we got caught up in some less than ideal weather.
Well, it's literally hailing. Wow, we really thought we could just go on this trip. Huh. Yeah.
Luckily, the hail stopped pretty quickly and didn't damage the car, which was fortunate since we were borrowing it since Dad's truck got ran into by a deer. Yeah, it was ran into by a deer, not the other way around. Anyways, after a 2-hour drive, we finally approached not Bensonville. This is UP's Proviso Yard, the UP yard we planned to visit on the trip. We were going to the Bensonville yard first, so we only got to see it from this above view on the overpass. Funnily enough, though, we did spot some CP power making its way through the UP yard.
Trains, one driving right there. Let's go and move it.
Full CP last show.
Eventually, we rolled past Scott Street, the original rail fanning location from the first Bensonville trip. We decided not to rail fan here as to not miss any of the moves in the yard. But looking down the tracks, we saw a headlight of a light power move of 2 AC-44s pulling into the yard. Once we parked at Scott Street, my dad was being kind of dumb. Instead of walking down underneath the overpass like we should have done, he tried to find an entrance into the yard from the other side, which doesn't exist. We ran up and down this side of the yard over and over, just trying to find a spot to rail fan, which we didn't because it didn't exist. Here we passed by the intermodal cars and then stopped at this small railroad crossing before passing over. On our way back, we saw this building, which still had its Canadian Pacific Railway marks intact. We quickly pulled over under the other side of the overpass for this relatively bad shot of those two AC-44s we had saw earlier. The KCS one is leading and the CP one is trailing. On the other side of the yard was our intermodal switcher for the day, CPSD33 Eco 5034. After that, we drove down the road some more, searched around the yard some more, and finally ended up at the exact spot I told Dad he should have gone from the very start. The same place we had been on the previous Bensonville trip, right underneath the overpass, which is helpfully sheltering us from the rain.
We're back, boys. But we're back, boys. CPKC, Bensonville Intermodal Terminal. CPKFC. We've made it, boys.
As soon as we arrived, the two AC-44s, which had just stopped, started up again and started reversing into the locomotive storage sidings. Note how much more visible the smoke coming off the radiators are in the rain. Now we get a proper view of the 5034, which was just sitting there. It's supposed to be switching out the intermodal ramp, but traffic must have been slow for intermodal this day because it didn't move. In fact, absolutely nothing moved. We were here for quite a while and, well, literally nothing happened, so we decided to leave and head to a spot on the other side of the yard which I had scouted out previously on Google Maps. I thought that there was supposed to be a massive parking lot here, which I could easily view the yard operations from. But, as you can see, that massive parking lot turned out to be a massive bust, as it was all under construction. On our way there, we saw this spot where I had seen NS 4002, one of the shadow bonnets, on the last Bensonville trip, and we passed under this underpass, which had a train parked on it. Finally, we pulled up to this side of the yard. Although we then realized that the parking lot was non-existent, there were fortunately a few spots on the other side of the road that we could pull over. We didn't see really many trains, and the fence limited our filming options, so it wasn't the greatest spot. We passed by this set of wheels next to the locomotive shops, which was pretty cool, I guess. And there was also this set of intermodal well wagons from the Multimark era. And there is the main office building at Bensonville Yard. As you can see, this one has had its CP marks changed. Then we pulled up to the main area on this side of the yard, and then proceeded to get jump scared by these two Jeeps. 4420 is a GP 38-3, and 2236 is a GP 33 Eco. These two are a remote set like the Sioux unit is. They're controlled remotely via a belt pack, which is pretty interesting. But what do remote units do? Well, hump work, of course, and oh. Right here was CPKC's hump at the yard. This was the main reason this yard was expanded by the Milwaukee Road in the 1950s. They wanted a hump here. As you can see, the cars decouple as they roll down the hill. Very innovative, at least for the time when hump yards were invented. However, as I said, remote sets almost always push hump cars. And as they continued to shove these set of grain coppers farther and farther down the track, we caught a glimpse of the two hump units, those being two more GP38-3s, just like the 4420. Huh? What was that awe for? Wonder what could possibly be... Oh! There it is, boys. The Sioux unit. Sioux 4448. As it slipped by, we knew we had to get a better shot, so we raced down trying to get a better shot. But as I said, there are literally 0 good spots to look at trains from this side of the yard. Defeated, we headed back to our previous rail fanning spot, saying we would go catch the Sioux later. Immediately once we arrived, this KCS Gevo pulled out of the yard, leading a bare table solo. Things got real busy after that. We heard a ding, 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 and we knew immediately that it was Metra. We knew Metra would come through here, and it was one of the main goals of the trip. What we weren't expecting, however, was Metra 500, the RTA Heritage Unit. We were surprised by that, but as you saw, the shot was pretty bad as I zoomed out too quickly, and, well, the lighting was bad. Fortunately, though, Metra trains always come back. Knowing we had time to kill before that would happen, we headed off to the bottleneck in the middle of the yard. First, we spotted a KCS Gevo, CPKC 44, and some Norfolk Southern power sitting at the locomotive shops. We looked down into the yard and saw a remote set with an SD40-2 leading. And the minute it moved, we realized what was trailing. This was it, the remote set that I had come out here to see. Trailing second was Sioux Line GP38-2, number 4448, the last Sioux Line painted locomotive in service on CPKC. And just like that, I finally got the moving shot of 4448 I had been waiting for an entire year. And that wasn't it. Immediately after, it shoved back into the yard to do more switching. With that massive success now in the bag, we headed back to our normal rail fanning spot for what we thought would be the rest of the day. And things just didn't calm down because immediately once we arrived, a CSX power move pulled out with a YN2 trailing and a normal CSX YN3 AC44 leading. Now that the rain had subsided, we could actually walk over to get a better view of them. And then they moved again, giving us this great shot of the 539 in trail. As the pair of AC-44s pulled under the bridge, we realized that they weren't pulling anything, and they would soon reverse into the locomotive storage sidings, and we wouldn't be able to see them again for the rest of the day. So I made the decision to head up onto the overpass to catch them going back where the YN2 would be leading. And I just barely made it in time before 539 spectacularly chugged its way underneath the overpass. Well, most of the way anyways. They paused briefly for an engineer to flip a couple switches before they were able to pull forwards and head into the locomotive storage siding. I then nabbed this quick grab shot of the 5034 before heading down and noticing that there was a CPG though spinning on a turntable. I didn't even know there was a turntable back there. Then, to our shock, this mainline intermodal reversed into the yard. We were very confused as we didn't know that mainline trains would just stop and then pull back into the yard. Like, we hadn't even seen this thing come through in the opposite direction. We hadn't seen this on the previous Bensonville trip, so that's why we weren't expecting it. Anyways, this train was being shoved into the intermodal ramp. And as I was filming that, I was jump scared by 500 and quickly turned the camera to get a far superior shot to last time. And then, almost immediately after that, a CSX transfer train pulled through with yet another YN2 in the lead and an SD70 Mac in second. After that pulled through, the power pushing the intermodal showed up, and it turned out to be a matched set of KCS GEVOs. I had never seen a full KCS lash-up before, so this was very nice. As those two slunk behind some auto racks, another set of G-Vills pulled out of the yard. This time it was mismatched, with a CP1 leading and KCS1 in second. They then had to stop for the points to switch for them to reverse back into the yard, so I was able to get some nice close-up shots of them. The Gevo here is unpatched, which isn't too rare nowadays, but I've seen plenty of AC44s that have this little logo on the front patched out with a white mark. Anyways, the Kansas City Southern and Canadian Pacific marks on these two are still intact. I don't think CPKC will ever patch their locomotives, but repaints might happen soon. After, the set of G-Vills pulled forwards, even farther than I had expected. With one of the point sections switched, they were able to go back into the yard to pick up their train. They did have to stop halfway through, though, so that another point section could be switched. Note the weird wasp stripe wrapped handrails on the front of this locomotive. I don't know if that's a KCS spec or if that's something that CPKC has been putting onto the fronts of their Southern Belle locomotives. Someone let me know. Then, the 2 KCS GEVOs pulled out of the yard. They had dropped off their intermodals, and the rest of the train was now heading back onto the main line. That CP GEVO that had turned on the turntable earlier had left this set of power, with a KCS Ace and another CP GEVO, long hood forwards. With no other option, the crew drove the consist backwards into the yard, giving me my first ever long hood forward video. As they headed out as well, also to get over the points to head onto the other side of the yard, I realized that the train with the 2 KCS GEVOs had completely stopped. As this set of power slowed down so that the points could be changed, the other train shoved back into the yard. I decided to head up onto the overpass as the power passed. With the same few trains moving in and about the yard, I decided to get some aerial shots of them. Of course, that judgment was immediately shattered as this all-new train with a single CPGVO leading pulled out of the yard. Meanwhile, the CPGVO and KCS Ace that were previously long hood forward rolled by and stopped in the center of the yard. And as they did that, another Metra passed. And this may look like 500 heading back in the other direction, but I could have sworn I saw 502 on the number plates. 502 and 500 are painted identically and are both RTA heritage units. But, as with 500, Metra trains always come back. So it looks like I was staying here for another hour or so. Then the mismatched set of GVOs pulled ahead directly under me, making for a very epic shot. GVOs, well, I hate them, but I gotta admit, they do sound pretty good. After dropping off their cars, the matched set of KCS GVOs pulled out light engine. And then reversed into the intermodal sidings. Then the single CP GVO pushed its train back into the yard and directly underneath me. Followed soon after by the mismatched GVOs. Then the pair of KCS GEVOs pulled a little ahead. They would be sitting here for the next day or so. This was the last shot up on the overpass. And pretty much immediately once I was down, the 2 yard engines we had seen earlier, the GP33 Eco and GP38-3, pulled through. This shot was funny, because I put it here to see the Jeeps passing from behind the overpass pillar, and, well, they had stopped. Then, the mismatched pair of GEVOs once again pulled forwards. As they headed out of the yard engines headed in. The lone CP GEVO decided to join the party and pulled out of the yard as well. Eventually, the mismatched GEVO's train came to a halt, blocking my view of the other one. And then reversed back, still blocking the view of the other one. The intermodal cars rolled by as the train came to another halt. With the intermodal cars now directly in front of me, I was able to get another shot of the lone CP GEVO as it pushed its train back into the yard. Using the Metra train tracker, we were able to tell that 502 would be here soon. Not wanting an identical shot to 500, we headed down to the Franklin Park Metra station. And soon enough, after a while, 502 came. As it turns out, I wasn't actually going insane. 502 was really the power on this train. As it came to a stop, I walked up to get some nice photos of it. This is probably my favorite photo I took on the entire trip. It soon left, and I thought this was going to be the last time I would see it. I was wrong, but we'll get to that. We had waited so long that it was only about 9 minutes before 500 came back again, so we decided to stick around for that. As we looked down into the yard, we saw the mismatched Gevos were finally pulling out onto the main line for good and racing the 2 Jeeps who are now doing yard work. The crew on the mismatched Gevos was very nice and gave me a horn salute as they pulled through the station. Unfortunately, the shots were ridiculously backlit because you can't really get to the other side of the tracks here. As the 500 approached, I realized this would be a great opportunity to test out my mini camera, which I got a long time ago and only now have realized how to actually use it. So I placed it underneath the train as 500 pulled into the station. Of course, I also took a conventional shot as well. As it turned out, 500 also had a friendly crew. I jogged alongside the moving freight train as I headed back to the car, as we had one more location to visit. That location was a siding where an abandoned Burlington Northern E unit, Maryland Rail Area Commuter number 91, was parked. This locomotive used to run trains around Chicagoland and then was transferred to the Maryland Area Regional Commuter, or MARC, for commuter service over in Maryland. It worked there for a few years before it was somehow dragged back to Chicago, and ended up here on this abandoned siding. As you can see, it's been tagged relentlessly since it was put here. And the inside has been hollowed out for parts to restore another E-unit. After seeing that living piece of history, we headed over to a mall that I don't remember the name of, so unfortunately there's no cool map transition in this segment. There, we grabbed dinner before heading back to the hotel. And on the way back, we rolled over the Union Pacific line with a pair of CNGVOs laying on the bridge as foreign power. Once we got to the hotel, we did nothing. What do you expect? We never do anything at hotels. I don't think anybody ever does, unless they're like going swimming or something. Now, we weren't planning to return to Bensonville next morning. We were planning to head straight to UP's Proviso yard. But of course, we had to drive over Bensonville to get there.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
So, we headed down to Bensonville once again, where I managed to catch 5034 actually moving. Anyways, over on the right side of the yard, there was a totally normal KCS Ace. Okay, that was unexpected. This bad boy right here is CPKC XKCS 4009, the Saluting KCS Heroes Tribute Unit. Originally built in 2006 with the rest of KCS's Aces, and originally painted in the Gray Ghost scheme. It was repainted into Southern Belle in 2020, and then it was given this unique commemorative scheme only a few months after that. You can't see it in any of these photos because you can't cross the tracks here, but the other side of this is written in Spanish. Judging that KCS has, half their tracks in Mexico, that makes sense. Fortunately, the English side was on the bright side of the tracks during the shoot here. Or maybe it wasn't really, because this is actually the backlit side of the tracks. It just looks like the bright side because it was storming again. Oh, and yeah, there was some other power on the other side of the yard, but nobody cares about them. The engine was attached to what we thought was simply a switching train. We expected it to back into the yard, but it didn't. Instead, it headed forwards. Luckily, though, I did manage to get a shot of it moving, which is something I thought I wouldn't get because, it was static before. So that was really lucky. We knew we had to take full advantage of this opportunity. So the moment the engine snuck under the overpass and out of view, we jumped in the car and started to chase it. We needed to make it down to Scott Street before it did. Once we made it down there, we realized only the top light on it was on, which meant that it was only doing a switching move, and that we would have to go back to the yard in order to catch it reversing if we wanted some more shots. Hold up! As it turns out, it wasn't a switching train like we had thought. This was a fully assembled mainline freight ready to depart. The reason it only had one engine was because there was another one in the middle as a DPU. It only occurred to me now just how rare of an opportunity this really was. This train had just departed. It had just finished switching. If we had gotten there like 10 minutes later, this train would have already been out of the yard by the time we arrived, and we would have never stopped. But if we had arrived 10 minutes earlier, then, well, we would have waited forever, and we would have decided to leave because the engine hadn't moved yet. Anyways, as I was having this realization, a Metra high rail truck passed by. And that truck was apparently assigned because minutes later, a Metra train roared through with 502 at the end. Okay, I did kinda lie. Or actually, more accurately, withhold crucial information for dramatic effect. This train did have to go back into the yard 1 or 2 more times, I believe, to pick up more cars, and then it departed. Okay, I've set everything straight now. We obviously had more stuff to do today than just sit around here, and we'd already gotten plenty of shots of the 4009 anyways, so we decided to leave and head to UP's Proviso yard. We passed over Bensonville one last time. Well, one last time for this trip. There will inevitably be a third Bensonville trip. I'm pretty sure we all know that. Anyways, I really do hope you enjoyed this video. It took a lot of time to go to Bensonville, film this stuff, and then edit this video. So if you watched all the way through, I greatly appreciate that. Anyways, remember, this is only a part 2 to this 3 and inevitably longer eventually series. So if you're still in the mood to watch some more train content, why not check out part 3, UP's Proviso Yard and the BNSF racetrack in Aurora. Anyways, this is Wheel Arrangements, and make sure to come back next time for another vlog just like this one. Hello everyone. Welcome to Cement. Look at that KCS Gevo. Look how unpatched it is. No way. Look at that. KCS Gevo. This is Franklin Park. Be safe. Watch for trains from either direction.